What's going on, everybody? This is the Blockchain Backer, bringing you the latest cryptocurrency news and analysis. Today, we're going to be talking about the Bitcoin price chart as the price is sitting at $37,500 as I'm recording, continuing to waddle its way up, very similarly to what we saw happen back in 2020 and what we've been discussing about for the last 3 months on this channel, going through the liquidation event that took place back in August, how similar that was to back in 2020, where everybody was screaming that we were going to go down to $3,000, just like we saw everybody screaming that we're going to go down to $12,000 here in August, September, and October, only for price to break up to the upside, shake a lot of people out of the market, just like it did in 2020 before the market got rampaging. The expectations on this channel were, if this thing is even following this, probably get stuck in there for about a month if you were just going to do the exact same thing. Crazy enough, we are on day number 27 of this. Still unknown if it is going to actually break to the upside just yet, but sure looking awfully familiar to what we have seen before. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about a couple of things, in particular, really tying in the stock market with what is going on right now and what was going on with the stock market when we were back in here back in 2020. Do we have a similar case happening here right now? We've done lots of videos. I've written newsletters on it. I've written threads over there on Twitter proving it. Not a single person has been able to rebuttal it successfully. The correlation of breakouts for Bitcoin in relation to the Dow Jones Industrial Average, that it is not the block reward halving that is causing these things, but it is actually the Dow Jones Industrial Average. So how are we doing right now with the Dow compared to how we were doing in 2020? Are we setting ourselves up for some monster rip to happen in Bitcoin and in the cryptocurrency market? Or are we still just following 2016 like we've talked about, with the timing of everything happening at the exact same time, even some of these happening within hours of each other? Nearly 300 days. It's 299 days away from the peak, happening within hours. And then over here, the actual breakout of the range happening here within hours, 700 days after the peak. And then, as we know, we leave this one right here at the same time as well. Are we still just following 2016, which would just end up being another recovery after a completed super cycle, as we saw back in 2012 and over there in 2015 and 16? And while both the case here for just a recovery after a super cycle and following 2016 have a long-term positive outlook for Bitcoin, even continuing to do something like this at least gives like a medium-term outlook of like absolute awesomeness over there for Bitcoin. But I think both of those things do depend a lot on what's going on over here in the stock market, because the current price that we're at for Bitcoin is really at the exact level that we've talked a lot about with the scenario of Ethereum, where it has a big bear and then it goes below its previous all-time high and then goes in for a nice big bounce back into resistance levels, rolls over, and then goes all the way down. That we're really kind of at the moment of truth for that with Bitcoin, with where the price is right now, being here at $38,000. For the last year and a half, I've been very critical of the 12Kers, saying, look, even if you have ultimate doom scenario written into your books of what you think the future is going to be, Bitcoin is likely going to do some type of retrace first. And we've tried to outline lots of different variations of what retraces could look like for Bitcoin. And this is the first one, right? A year and a half of people screaming that we're going lower. Right now, we see a lot of that sentiment has shifted. Those 12Kers have really kind of capitulated. You don't see them anywhere anymore. It's typical. Some of the super famous 12K callers have capitulated on that idea, saying that's not going to happen. And of course, it's happening as we get right back here. So I'm of course mindful of this, but it's pretty clear of like what the problems were that gave the warning sign that that was going on in there, and that things were uglier than what typically happens for Ethereum in particular. And so to say it's going to stop here and just sell here, it's really just kind of a guessing game. We wouldn't really have any confirmation of it actually being that unless we actually fell down quite significantly. We probably have to fall about 30% from here to say, yep, that was it. And then of course, you know, that's where people say, well, good job, Captain Hindsight. Why didn't you tell me while we were in the thick of it? And it's like, well, because you don't really know while you're in the moment of it right now. But we're there, right? And the thing that would confirm it would be as if we do go break below 31,800. And in particular, if we start like closing candles down in the 26s, the 27s, and the 28s, as we see happen over here in Ethereum, that it does break back down below these previous resistance levels that had turned to supports, and then we break through them and go lower. And why would that open up the door for it to say that, hey, we could be doing that now? And it's because of just what we have seen from Bitcoin historically, that when we go into these recoveries after super cycles, we do the things that we've talked about many, many times on this channel, and why we are not in 2019 and 2020 right now. But after completed super cycles are done, we tend to range, break the range, backtest the range, and then continue on. We'll backtest a range and then continue on. And that's what we've done in these past completed super cycle corrections and recoveries. And this one right here is 2016, like we've been talking about over here. And again, it's the same scenario, right? It's ranging, breaking the range, backtesting the range, ranging, breaking the range, backtesting the range, ranging, breaking the range, backtesting the range. So coming back down to touch $32,000 would be totally normal in a recovery after a super cycle. But what would not be normal would be to go breaking down and closing back down into these ranges, right? And so in current times right now, we know that we spent a lot of time in a range, left the range, back tested the range. Notice we didn't close any weekly candles into the previous range. Now we leave this one, entering into a new area. If for some reason we pull back down in here and then start closing candles in here, yikes, that's not good. And that really opens up the door for this. So that's the thing to be mindful of with the current situation that we're at right now and where we're at. If some big fat dimmer candle arrives in here and we just go chilling back down in here in the 28s and 27s, well, guess what? We've now lost the top of that range, and that's likely not good. So we are there, and we have to get through here to be able to dismiss this thing, or be able to say, well, look, something is a little different in here. While we got stopped out in here, we're actually marching up higher, right? And if we're higher, then we could say, okay, well, something's a little different in here. You know, we didn't get rejected at that level that we thought was going to be that big problem area. But as you can see right now at current location, we are in it. So again, all of 2022, all of 2023, I did not let the thousands of comments on my Twitter, the slander, the everything of saying we're going to 12K, that I'm an irresponsible dingus, change my thoughts that we would go back into retracement levels. But as we get to them, now it does start becoming, all right, can we get through these things? I had pretty dang strong conviction we would get back to them. But now it's the big question of, can we get through them? So the first one has arrived. We're there. We've talked about what would be problems, and that would be inconsistent to all recoveries of past super cycles, and that maintaining closures above 31,800 is what's important. Will you see wicks that go below 31,800? I would think probably. We can go back in here and we could see that we get wicks that come down below the previous level, right? You get several of them over here that go below. But do we start breaking down inside and start closing down in here through all of this? No. We hold the support level. It stays intact and we bounce off of it, right? So that's what would end up being the problem in here for Bitcoin if we do end up breaking back down, right? And we don't know the answer to that right now. Anybody looking for a fortune teller to tell you it's going to happen, I don't have that for you. What I had for you as a fortune teller was to say we'd get back there. We've gotten there. Now, we got to figure out what's going to happen. So this is like our bear scare scenario right here. We're going to move on from this, and then we're going to start talking about like the optimistic ones that probably everybody wants to hear about. But I thought it would be important to say, hey, look, this is where we are at first, right? Recognize this is where we are. This is what we talked about for years. This is that scenario that if it rejects from here, gives you that doomtown scenario of Bitcoin to like $2,000 to $3,000. So get through here, please, Bitcoin. That's where we come to here. We say, okay, look, well, let's cool our jets before we all run for the hills and cry. The setup that's happening here, the price behavior that led us to this moment in here, it's all very similar to exactly what happened back in 2020. Somebody who was making YouTube videos during all of this, recalling all of this, having the same stuff happen, people yelling at me saying I'm an irresponsible dingus, everybody's unemployed, we're all wearing masks and gloves as we go to the grocery store, and hand sanitizer is limited to 2 per person. We're at 25% unemployment. What makes you think it's even remotely possible that Bitcoin could go to 60, 70, 80,000, right? That's what it was like in here, right? We're going to 3K. That's what we had happen in here, right? So we have the exact same emotional response from retail investors in here. Then we get the breakout. Now we're waddling in here. All this stuff is looking good in here. till this day, right? We haven't seen some big rejection. We just seen price continue to do exactly that. So the big question for me, of course, it all comes back to the original theses, right? Being like, hey, look, if we're going to get a breakout to happen in here, if we're going to see Bitcoin roaring to the upside, what is something that we need to see? We probably need to see that coming from the stock market, right? So the question comes of what was happening with the stock market right here. And I'm not talking about the Fed printing money. I'm not talking about stimulus checks. I'm not talking about any narrative that you want to go with to say, this is why. That's what retail investors need. They need narratives. They need whys. I don't need that. I just need this. Tell me what was going on in here in all markets, and then we can try to answer, are we similar in here as we were to then? So as we review these time periods, we're going to zoom in on here from 2020 for Bitcoin. That is this moment right here. We're going to zoom way out to understand where that is, right? That is right before things go absolutely nuts over here. We'll keep zooming out on these time frames to get a better picture of where this was at that time, right? Here's the peak of the 2017 bull run. Here we go, crashing in 2018, retracing in 2019, C19 in 2020. Here we are. We'll zoom out one more time frame to get a better idea of that particular location. And now we're going to go ahead and start adding the Dow Jones Industrial Average in here to understand what was happening with the Dow. So I'll click on this little plus up here, DJI, new price scale. There we have it. So to remember what was happening here with the Dow had been ranging here since 2017 in a broadening wedge. And then eventually DJI goes breaking out into new all-time highs. And you see that over here, right? Notice what was happening with Bitcoin at this exact moment here. We'll do this, right? Here's C19. Here you go. Move everything. Notice that Bitcoin is working out this little zone, which is what we keep talking about in here. Dow is working on this ABC, and then suddenly the Dow starts going for the break, right? Notice it breaks above the peak of this ABC over here, and then boom, finally we start getting above the C19 highs, and now the Dow Jones is in new all-time highs in here. This is where Bitcoin breaks out. This is where Bitcoin really starts to go as the Dow Jones gets into those new all-time highs and starts roaring together. Go, go, go. But notice we had the big C19 crash. We get all the way back into the retracement levels. We ABC in the retracement levels. But the true breakage for Bitcoin comes when the Dow goes in for this break at the same time, right? Here we are, 2020. Dow starts going, and it goes to the all-time high, sets the new all-time high. Bitcoin, it goes with it. So here we are in Bitcoin right now. Here we are with the Dow trying to fight back up. Here's the all-time high way back over here for the Dow. It's way over here at 36,826. Currently, we sit at 35,064. And right now, it's about 6%. It's less than 6% away from its all-time high. If the Dow broke from this range and started going up here, would we then suddenly have the exact same elements that we had back in here to then take out the all-time high for the Dow while we're at the same spots as we were? We would. So we technically have similar elements over there in the Dow and in the stock market, but we don't have confirmed breakout of the Dow Jones just yet. When Bitcoin left this range, we technically didn't have them with the Dow Jones just yet either. But for us to keep marching on, that is what occurred. So we're kind of at this moment right now of, will the Dow get out of here? Will the Dow get through, take out the highs that were set back in July and August, and keep marching to those all-time highs? Because if it does, then it's just like what happened in 2020 when we had these same things happening in here. So if we want something to cheer for, seems pretty likely we need to be cheering for that Dow Jones to go for it. So we can look to other elements in the market on things that are positive. For one, the NASDAQ 100 technology sector. I've done lots of stuff on this particular technology sector index in the last couple of months on whether or not Bitcoin is money or is Bitcoin a tech. A lot of people will argue both, but you'll find that prices move with the stock market and a lot of times with tech. We could see how close the technology sector comes to its top back here in November of 2021. And then the bottoms coming in here in October and November. And then the reversals out of the lows happening here. But look over here at tech. Tech's doing exactly what we were talking about with the Dow Jones, where it A, B, C's, and then it goes in for the breakout. Notice it gets above the top of the ABC and then just kind of keeps going. This was the breakout for Bitcoin in here, that we are appearing to show similarities to that. and that tech has now gotten through the 702 Fibonacci retracement after struggling underneath it ever since July. Very similar happening in here. So this is a positive sign. Even today, it's still continuing to march up higher while Bitcoin stalls waiting for its turn to go. So I would argue that this is pretty positive to see this over here on the NDXT. And knowing the correlation to these two and to the stock market, I'd argue it's pretty positive, but I'd also argue we got to get the Dow too, probably. But the major question is, are there similarities to what was happening here and here? They're very similar. I'd argue they are similar, and especially with what we're seeing happening over here in the NDXT. We need more from it, right? We need it to go push for those all-time highs. But the fortunate thing is we do know that these indexes have come up shy of their 4.236 extensions, so there's still a little room for them to try to go get it. As I've shown over here with the Dow Jones Industrial Average, when you take a look at how big the Roaring 20s run is, I did not modify the size of this. I literally just placed it here and started it at the bottom of where a great financial crisis is. The Roaring 20s that led to the Great Depression just so happens to be an exact 4.236 extension of our entire range that we've had in here. So we saw this with Bitcoin. We saw how it went above the 3.618 Fibonacci extension back in March, April, and May of 2021. It pulls down and then it goes on and hits its all-time high at a 4.236 extension. And then it was lights out for Bitcoin, as I've shown many, many times here on the YouTube channel. Above that 3.618 extension, the big fall goes up and whoop, and then it was over. So this argument can still have some validity to it. And well, if you get into the all-time highs, whether it's short-lived or not, that is still a condition requirement for Bitcoin and for the crypto market, is to get that for those big, massive runs. And well, can we get it over here? So I'd argue that there's some stuff going here for it, especially when we look at the NASDAQ 100 technology sector. And to kind of put that more into context of the NDXT or the NASDAQ 100 technology sector, here you go. This is the NDXT on the left. Here's Bitcoin on the right when Bitcoin had its peak, right? So you notice that Bitcoin comes off the lows, it gets near its 702 retracement, comes back, and it finds support down here on the selling climax recovery, right? So here's the recovery, here's the new support and resistance level. We go back and we back test it, and then we thrust up into the all-time highs. Notice that is what happens over here on the NDXT. We get back into the 702, pull back to find support on the selling climax, finds the support, pinpoint, nails it, boom, shoots up. And notice it gets right here above the 702 and like back tests it. Notice that's what we do over here as well, up above, and then back tests it, right? So this example, like I just showed for Bitcoin, is where it goes above the 3.618 extension here in April of 2021, big fall. And then there in November of 2021, we go on and actually hit the 4.236 extension. But it has this ABC first, ABC. We know that's the same thing happening for the NASDAQ too, right? Gets above the 3.618, does the big pullback. Here we go. We get up closer, and what do we have? We have the ABC in here, and now the NASDAQ today, as we get going today, what is it doing? It's taking out the height of the start of the ABC in here. So it's starting to get a breakout here in the NASDAQ too, which is what we had happen for Bitcoin in here, to go take out its peak and then hit its top, and then that was the end of it. So to kind of summarize it all, it's like, do we have conditions in here that are similar from 2020 here in 2023 right now when it comes to the stock market? And we know that this move right in here was the move that was taking it back to the all-time high. If that is true for the NDXT, if that is what is happening right in here, this was the move for Bitcoin that was taking it back to the all-time high. This is what was getting it to its 4.236 extension coming off of an ABC. ABC. We have the same thing for the NDXT, the NASDAQ 100 technology sector. I would argue there are some similarities happening in here. I would say the one thing that hasn't shown itself yet would be the Dow. And maybe it's just a little bit delayed behind. But to see this peak getting taken out here today for the NASDAQ and the NDXT, these are pretty good signs. These are things you want to see at least. You know, does that mean that Bitcoin goes soaring into brand new all-time highs and starts a new bull run? Does it mean it stays with 2016? Does it mean it's just a big fat retracement and then it's over because the stock market's going to crash like this, just like Bitcoin did, and it's going to be horrible? Those answers are yet to be determined. But if we're living in the moment right now of, is this similar to this when it comes to the stock market, I would argue yes. So that's positive, but it will have to be being mindful again of these are the types of things that happen, knowing that the Dow Jones did the same thing as the NASDAQ. It got to the 3.618, hasn't gotten to the 4.236 extension yet. If these things go into new all-time highs, right, this is the most Googled recession in the history of all time. It goes into the new all-time high. What happens? Everybody becomes euphoric. CNBC turns on the bull stuff, right? Everything gets super crazy. Everybody becomes absolutely nuts with their money, just throwing it everywhere and acting like goofballs. So it would be very optimistic in the short run for crypto, but having to be mindful that these are typically reversal patterns. And what this whole thing is actually just distribution, multi-year distribution. The big boys are all selling. They're all letting go. But it's very normal to be having these up thrusts into new all-time highs while they're still distributing. It's just that the messaging that gets sent to us, the retail investors on mainstream media, is, hey, we're in new all-time highs. The world is celebrating and we're everything's fine. No recession, soft landing, everything is gravy. But just to be being mindful about things like this, and of course, things like this with the Dow Jones and how high we are, right? We're like 10% away from how high we were in the roaring 20s that led to the Great Depression. So it would be looking like short-term, super exciting, super exciting, but just then be mindful of that next step. And of course, we'll be covering all of that as we get there. So otherwise, I'd say positive outlook. And I'd say there are similarities there in the stock market. Just the thing where we have it in the NASDAQ, we have it in the NDXT. We're just kind of missing it over there in the Dow, and hopefully that shows up pretty soon. But as I go ahead and wrap it up, we're sitting at 37,733. Fingers crossed, we end up getting it. Otherwise, that's going to be it for this one, guys. It's going to be a short week for me. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Hopefully you can find something to be grateful for. If you can't figure out anything, sometimes it is the simple stuff. Just the fact that you have food, the fact that you have water, a roof over your head. And if you've hit the jackpot in your life, then you have people who love you and people who you love. And really, that's the root of the majority of our happiness. For that, I'm grateful. Everything else, just a cherry on top. But it'll be a short week for me, guys. It'll be Monday through Wednesday. I'll be off Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, putting on 5 pounds of fat. If you're looking for something to do during that off time, of course, bcbacker.com will still be out there with 40 videos and 11 hours of content available for you, delivered in the same format as my YouTube channel. So if you like my YouTube content, the stuff is very similar over here. All types of historical information about the cryptocurrency market and teaching you how to do your own charts and set them up in TradingView and CoinTrader Pro, along with downloadable PDFs in here so you can print them out for yourself or keep them there on your computer. It's $39 one time, no subscription, no recurring fees, right here on bcbacker.com. Then, of course, the newsletter over here. This is a subscription. This is at blockchainbacker.substack.com. Lately, been doing a lot of deep diving into altcoin data to see what was different about 2021 compared to 2017. Turns out a lot of things were different, but we have found some data that was very consistent in improving odds. It's been a big hit over here, so you could check that out, blockchainbacker.substack.com. There are links to both bcbacker.com and blockchainbacker.substack.com down here in the description of this video, in each of my videos and live streams. Otherwise, I wish you all the best. Here's to cheering for the stock market to keep roaring and for Bitcoin to get above 38K. All right, that's going to be it. Thank you so much for watching. If you could, please like this video and give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you can be notified of when I create new content and when I go live. As always, this is not investment advice, and I am not a financial advisor. But if you ever need a pick-me-up or a little bit of reassurance, just remember that the blockchain backers got your back. Have a good one.